It was the 4th day in a row he was sitting on the white bed with his head in his hands, waiting. The time he had to work perfectly overlapped with her free time, so they never met, no matter how hard Dew tried to speed up his process in finishing up. This day he had waited for the night to come. There was no other chance but to meet her that day, and he was painfully aware of it. His breathing was unsteady while his heart pumped heavily inside his chest. What was he supposed to say? "Sorry, my love, but this random person I've known for barely half a year has a more convenient time schedule than you do. By the way, happy birthday. It will probably be your last." Dew sobbed and tore at his hair before putting his hand into his fist and slamming against his temples repeatedly. It didn't hurt enough. It never could. He knew the diary was lying next to his other belongings in Jonah's room. He had opened it several times when the other one wasn't around, but every time he had wanted to write something, no words ended up on the paper. Why would he commemorate something so shameful? Josephine had been right, he should be dead, maybe worse, but he didn't want to die like that, and neither did Josephine. She didn't hate him. She had told him before throwing him out of her and her husband's room. She was just disappointed and sorry for the person Dew had practically left to die alone. The absolute silence of the late night was interrupted by a quiet but distinct noise gradually approaching. Dew's heart stopped. Still he could feel the rushing of blood through his ears that made him deaf. His sweaty hands clawed at the cloth of his trousers. Then the door opened and she stepped in. Her eyes were empty, the step heavy, and he could clearly see the red rings under her eyes, even though it was dark as a November night should be. Perhaps his night sight had returned. Her sword tapped against the leg of the bed. She didn't know he was there. He could slip out and nothing would happen. The sword tapped against the chair and she took off the cape and put it on top. Her hand went towards her nape, where her uniform was being held together over her wings with 2 knots. "Avery," Dew whispered, but the name was swallowed up by the lump in his throat. She stopped in the middle of the motion until she continued. "Avery," he said again, but louder, sounding as scared as a child searching the monster underneath its bed. She brushed off her uniform and placed it in the chair on top of the cape. "What is it?" she asked softly. Dew regretted coming. Already she was being kinder to him than he deserved. Then he began. "I have to talk to you." "I figured. You stayed here for so many days. It leaves a certain smell, you know." Avery was tired, but not annoyed or angry. Just tired. "It's about where I was in the past weeks." "I know where you have been staying. It's not hard to find out with someone so talkative," she stated. It began undoing the laces on her boots. Dew swallowed hard. "What did he say?" "He regularly informed me about your well-being. I'm not all that surprised." "What did he tell you?" Dew repeated more urgently. "Don't worry, he didn't go into detail. He certainly showed enjoyment. I hope you got a mutual amount out of it," Avery said, without a hint of personal involvement. "Are you angry? You have the right to be angry. Why are you so calm?" His entire body jolted as she slammed her palms onto the table while seemingly looking out of the window. "It's not like I can't understand your reasoning." Dew watched her hunched over silhouette. She wasn't shaking or crying or screaming as he expected her to. "Why would you say that? Do you think you deserve to be treated like that?" he ranted as his fear and shame threatened to lessen. He heard her chuckle dryly before replying. "Deserve? Who deserves anything, really? Who decides what a person deserves? By that logic, I don't deserve you. I'm not empathetic, not funny, not healthy, and I'm not a man. Hell, I can't even fulfill the standard for women these days. I can't have children, can't please you whenever you want, because I'd go into stupor. Neither does my face look pretty. What is there in me to be desired? I'm not even human, I'm a corpse." She straightened up and freed her hair out of the knot, which fell down like a curtain above her back. "So, yes, you choosing him over me is only logical." Avery spoke so matter-of-factly again, like the time he had found her hurt arms, but then, finally, her voice cracked, and with the hint of a sob she continued, Still, for once I feel glad I can't see you anymore, because if I were to look at you right now, I might feel like I know you. Please do me a favor and leave. I can't stand your presence right now." It was as if a bucket of water from the lake she had shown him was emptied over him. It was cold, freezing even, but with the fragile calmness of a water surface. It had hit her, maybe not deep, but he had hurt her. He left with a weird mixture of relief and misery. Relief because he had kept his head. Misery because he knew she was in hell. Avery didn't show it. If she were to, it would surely tear the world apart. So she covered it up with a soft smile and easy words. Dew took the second key, now tied together with the other one, which allowed him to access Jonah's room. In reality, he didn't want to spend another night there, but where else was he supposed to go? Who would want him? Dew didn't know what to expect upon entering. It could be emptiness, which equaled sleep, Jonah, which also meant sleep, or... The Boer hybrid was still awake, sitting on the bed with his back leaned onto the window wall. "Where were you? It's late," Jonah spoke as Dew slowly made his way towards the bed. He was greeted with open arms and immediately pulled on top of the other man. "Not today," Dew muttered as soon as he guessed Jonah's intentions and tried pushing him away. He didn't move his hands a bit. Instead, he switched positions with Dew and began longingly kissing his cheek and neck. The one on the bottom tried to turn away, and with one hard push he got Jonah to sit up. For the first time his body acted upon his own will and defended itself. A new wave of confidence overcame him. Dew got himself into a sitting position as well and declared, "I don't want this right now." Every hand rested on his shoulder. "You do, though," Jonah said insistently. And as the words reached his ears, the new self-esteem was as if it had been washed away. No, he didn't want it. His mind, body, and soul wanted to get away, run out of this room to curl up underneath a saving wing, cry out and sob, because that's how he could break the numbness which traveled through Jonah's hand into him. But Dew obeyed. As always, the pain had him biting his teeth together before the guilty pleasure overwhelmed him, and he was nothing more than a toy in the hands of another. He hated it, and he hated how he reacted to it. Even more, he hated how much this stranger got to see of him, how he had him act out of his comfort zone and twist his thoughts to become a want not belonging to him he had to act upon. When Jonah was done and the other began to recover, beginning to collect his mind and silently cry like the times before the words "You look beautiful" were spoken, and all he wanted was to peel his skin off, tear out his hair, and pour acid into his face to melt off every desirable feature one could potentially see in him. Dew was unable to move due to the sleeping man's full weight holding him down, but his arm was. The diary sat on the ground right next to him, exactly in his reach, as if waiting for this very moment. He picked it up. Luckily, the leather strap held the pages closed, or else the knife would have fallen out. Carefully not to make a sound, he opened the last page he had written on a couple weeks ago. He stared at the following blank page. The pen was already in his hand, demanding him to continue writing at least something. Like so often lately, Dew didn't know what to write. There was too much to say, too much he didn't want to say, but in the end he placed the cold tip on the page and began to neatly put line after line next to and on top of one another, so that every letter could be read easily. He looked at his short but meaningful work for the day, stuffed the pen back, checked if the knife was still in place, which it was, and closed the pages before clumsily trying to wrap the leather strap back around. Then the diary ended back in the same position on the floor as before. He had only written one word. Now it was not only engraved in his mind and soul, but in this book as well. Traitor. With a small bundle on his belt and guiltily wearing the blue cape, he made his way down to the city the following morning. The winter finally showed its friendly face and had gentle flakes of snow twirl down from the sky, carried by a cold wind from the west. His feet carried Dew towards the graveyard. As expected, barely anyone was strolling through the rows of square stones to visit their loved ones. It took him a while to find the right row and stone. Every single one looked the same to him, and the names were withering away. Charles' empty grave was one of them. Taking turns in caring for it hadn't worked. Everyone had simply moved on with their life, and so did you. But there he sat, scratching the dirt and moss out of the carvings of his name, wondering where the man was now, if there was something after death. The visitor didn't carry any flowers or even an offering for the dead person. All he got was time and a lot of sorrow, which he wished to bury right next to the deceased cook. The gravedigger was nowhere to be seen. Still, the second grave was to be found after a few minutes of searching. A candle placed in a glass used to burn next to several bouquets, but the candle had fully burned down and the flowers had shriveled up and frozen. Maybe they had been placed out here by Sue a week ago for her sister, father, and lately her brother too. By accident, Dew had learned of his death. Aaron had mentioned it to Jonah while passing by. On this grave, Dew could not even enact the small service of cleaning it up. It was cared for more than most of the other ones, thanks to one loving family member who had not yet passed away. The city wasn't as empty as the graveyard. Traders offered their wares, shopkeepers went to work, craftsmen tinkered in their workshops to get ready for selling during the afternoon. Still, Dew barely took notice of any of them. Standing in the middle of the marketplace, Dew felt unsure where to go. Any kind of food-selling shop was out of consideration. Maybe a clothing shop? It would take ages to have something be done if he were to give up an order this day. No, it had to be something else. There was a lady selling soaps and other hygiene items. An elderly woman praised the abilities of her magical Lucky Rocks. A leather worker hung a new purse onto a presenting post outside his shop. Dew went far through the streets, unsure of his final destination and what to look for. Jewelry was too expensive. Furniture would be unnecessary and expensive as well. Winter flowers were lazy, and he figured them to be less appealing than the ones blooming during spring and summer, and perhaps it would come off as sadistic. He ended up going into a clothing shop after all, but not to give up an order, but to look for pieces done already. Stepping inside, the smell of sheep wool dominated the air, almost making him pass out. A man with long curly hair sat behind the counter, eyes fixed on an embroidery ring in his hands, while the glasses he wore were pushed all the way down to the tip of his nose. As the little bell above the door rang, he looked up at the potential customer. "Good morning, my good sir. What can I do for you?" He greeted Dew politely and laid his work to the side. "I'm just looking around," he responded. "Any ideas so far? We have offerings for the winter all over gloves, jackets, hats, and scarves," the shopkeeper went on in a calm and quiet manner which had Dew feel welcomed. "Do you have an idea for an unusual headwear?" The bundle felt a little lighter when he left the shop, but the cape was heavier. Luckily, the pouch on the inside had been large enough to fit the object he had acquired. Now the snow and mud wouldn't soak or stain it on his way back. Sometimes Dew's hand went into the pouch and felt a surprisingly soft and warm surface, which would surely hold someone cozily warm during the cold days to come. He sighed and watched the small clouds out of his mouth disperse in the thin air. A soft layer of white had already formed itself on the roofs, and while he walked along the meadows, he saw that they had not stayed unaffected. On his way towards the castle, he considered how he was supposed to deliver the item. Knocking after dropping it before the door seemed to be the safest way, but the least polite one, and if he owed anything, it was respect. A letter could be helpful as well, but he had no nice paper in his possession, and didn't know where to easily acquire some. In the end, he swore to appear in person. The steam from the kitchen rushed towards him as Dew opened the door while coming in from the patio. Frederick was already getting everything ready and threw a judging glance at him as he entered. "I'm late, aren't I?" Dew guessed. "You got a job to do and chose to go shopping. You're not the most reliable person I know," his chef commented and handed him a knife while pushing him towards the center table to make him useful. "I know," he thought to himself. Dew worked fast. As fast as he could, and even after delivering the food and being let off duty, he rushed back to the kitchen as quickly as possible. Contrary to his usual schedule, he didn't start cleaning up, but grabbed the cape and rushed upstairs even before switching into his casual clothes. All he did was taking off the blue and silver vest, as well as the white scarf-like cloth he wore around his neck as a servant. The dishes could wait, the item couldn't. He was completely out of breath by the time he reached the 5th floor and walked along the corridor, while his panicking thoughts circled through his head. Dew hadn't come up with a swift set of words he could use, or soothing gestures, or anything similar. The idea of improvising scared him as much as the action itself, but the time frame was small, too small to think too much about it. Dew reached the door and guessed he was in time. Then he considered whether to knock or to immediately unlock the door. Looking through the small lock, he couldn't see the key sticking through from the other side. Maybe she wasn't even there. Maybe he was too late. Then he looked at the gap between door and door frame, which was as thin as a fingernail, but he could still see the way the door had been kept in place. Usually there were 2 locks connecting the door and frame if shut properly. There was only one. The door was open. Strange. Dew put his hand on the doorknob and took a deep breath in. He wouldn't knock, he would just enter. Already he became a victim of tunnel vision. Maybe he would faint before even saying a word or delivering the gift. It was too late to change his mind. And then he pushed it, and the door flew open. Before taking even a single step inside, he smelled it. A sour, sweet stench mixed with iron reached his nose, and he knew what had happened before his eyes could even comprehend the picture before him. The sheets were drenched in a deep red which spread out into every direction. Torn up and motionless, she laid upon the bed, her open hand stretched towards the door, and half-open eyes, like pink glass pearls, twisted slightly upwards into her head. Over her towered a familiar figure. His clothes were splattered with the thick fluid. His wide open eyes stared at the motionless Dew before him in shock. Fishy eye. Jonah couldn't say another word before being struck down to the floor. Wooden splinters sunk themselves into his skin. Dew held the rest of the chair in both hands while his chest expanded and shrunk rapidly. With a short scream he lifted the furnishing up again and had it come crashing down on the man again. This time Jonah's face was hit, and the sound of a metal object sliding over the ground caught Dew's attention. The knife. Jonah reached out to grab it, but was stopped by the enraged creature standing above him, stepping on his wrist with one heel, to which Jonah howled in pain as the bone bursted from impact. Again Dew lifted up the wood and swung it downwards, but it crashed upon nothing more than the floor. Jonah was gone. Immediately Dew switched priorities and crawled onto the bed while the fresh blood soaked into his clothing. The main wound was harder to find than expected. Dew's hands dug and tore through the thick blue cloth where it was the darkest. Like rain rushing off the roof of the castle, the blood poured out of the white stab wound near the left side of her chest. Subconsciously, Dew began unwrapping his bandages and stuffing them inside the wound, hoping it would at least keep some of the blood from immediately flowing out. Removing the rest of the butchered clothing with the use of the knife, he got more fabric he could use as a sponge and plug as material to keep everything in place. He wrapped it around her chest as well as he could. Then he knew of nothing he could do for her anymore. The bandaging slowly soaked up as well, but it would hold it for a moment. The knife still in his hand, Dew decided what he had to do next. He sprinted through the corridor in his bloody clothes with the dirty knife in his hand as if he was a lunatic. He spotted the door and arrived just in time as it opened. If it wasn't for the last-second movement, Dew's blade would have buried itself deep into Jonah's neck instead of shoulder. Before Dew could go again, the stronger man seized his arm, looked him deep into the eyes, and spoke slow and menacingly, "You don't have to do this." All of his strength and all of his adrenaline immediately left his body and left Dew as a limp shell, forced to watch Jonah as he backed off and examined the deep new wound. He stared at Dew in disbelief as if he was the one in the wrong and claimed, "I tried so hard to keep you out of this." Dew couldn't move as Jonah's hand approached his neck and freed the necklace. Then he took it off wholly. You could have had a good life with me, but here you are, stabbing me as if I want to do you harm. But let me tell you, you were a good trophy to me, and I will get you back, eventually." And he went past him, pinching the wound shut with his unharmed hand, taking the necklace with him. And there was nothing Dew could do about it. Again his body wasn't under his own control, and even his mind wanted to give in and accept the unconscious state. There was this numbness. It wanted to overtake him, again, but his true thoughts wanted revenge for everything. He wanted the hybrid dead more than anyone else for deliberately driving Dew and his partner he truly loved apart, for having Dew build up trust to him after he swore never to harm the person he claimed to see as his sibling, and for taking a knife to Avery's heart. Finally a feeling returned to Dew. Forcing the rest of his body to wake up from the stupor, he dragged himself back to his wounded partner. He found the bandage to be sufficiently soaked through, so he swiftly exchanged them, desperately hoping for it not to be for nothing. This time he pulled the outer layer tighter and put another one loosely on top. Then he was out of usable fabric, so he sat there, hypnotized by the sight of her motionless, bleeding body with smaller wounds all over her arms, legs, and torso. She must have fought. She must have tried to keep herself unharmed, but he had been too strong and too violent, and you hadn't noticed his intentions soon enough. He changed his outer layer into his set of clothes and tried to dry off the blood off his hands and face before moving as much of the stained sheets as he could without moving Avery too much. Of course it had partially soaked into the mattress, but at least there was one more set of sheets to spare now. The old one could be used to wipe the few drops on the ground, and for new bandages. Then Dew left the room and forced himself to go back to the now empty room to look for anything of use. Just to be safe, he still had the knife in his possession. Almost every foreign object had been packed up and taken away. Dew found his diary laying on the table, not where he left it. Jonah had gone through his private possessions without his approval. He wondered in terror if the boar had also read the pages. Dew hated the fact that the sheet smelled of him, but the options he had were scarce in the knee-high, so he rolled them up and transported them over. Going a second time, he also retrieved his own other possessions, such as clothes. No, he didn't want to stay with Avery. It had been his fault, but he had to stay. He didn't even know if she could survive the wound or if it was enough to damage her body fatally. The last time Dew had seen his necklace it had been colored, even though with less saturation than before. How her eyes looked at that very moment Dew couldn't see, because he had closed them shut. So he sat there, next to her, waiting. Maybe she would wake up, maybe she wouldn't. Her chest didn't move. There was no heartbeat to be felt on her wrist and neck. There was no flow of air through her mouth and nose. But he didn't cease hoping for a miracle to happen. Maybe her corpse could withstand one more trauma. Just one more. The new bandage didn't soak through. Dew took her cape and laid it over her uncovered bloody chest before putting his own blanket over her. At least her pillow had sustained as little damage as possible. Dew decided to lock the door and lay down next to her. Her stretched out hand in his emitted heat as high as his own. It wasn't cold, which gave him hope for her survival. She still wore the ring. He wondered whether it was out of duty, safety, or because she hoped he would return at some point. Maybe out of all three, or at least two of them. Dew took off his own ring and placed it into her hand. He didn't know what she was supposed to do with it. Maybe secretly give it to someone else while Dew threw himself off a balcony to do her the justice she didn't know she deserved. But it had to wait for now. And even though the window looked tempting, Dew stayed until her hand closed shut on its own.